If today were your last day on Earth, would you be ready, not to leave, but to face it? To face the things you've never dared to think about, the words you never said, the people who slipped away, the quiet fear that haunts you every night. Death doesn't arrive with a bell, it comes in silence. And what you're most afraid of isn't death itself, but not knowing what comes after. But maybe what's been haunting you isn't the fear of death. It's the emptiness, the quiet kind, the kind that grows inside you little by little, day by day, until you're no longer sure if you're truly living or just existing. You still go to work, still answer messages, still say, "I'm fine," when someone asks how you are. But only you know, behind those familiar words is a space no one else can touch. A heaviness that doesn't sit in your body, but in the deepest part of your soul. Maybe it started with a loss. Your mother passed. Your partner left. Or maybe it was something simpler. One winter morning, you looked in the mirror and quietly asked yourself, "Who am I, now that everything I once knew feels so unfamiliar?" And in that moment you realized you've lived more than half your life, but never once truly paused to live. No one ever taught you what to do when you feel this way. You're not sick. You don't need medicine. You still laugh. But sometimes, in the middle of a quiet afternoon, your heart sinks, for no clear reason. And you wonder, "I'm not exactly sad, but I don't feel happy either." You're not weak. You're not broken. Maybe you're waking up. You're beginning to see something the world spends its life avoiding. That living isn't the same as being alive. That if life is only about breathing, working, spending, and then vanishing, something doesn't feel right. They say death is the end. But if that's true, why do you still dream about those who've passed? Why do you sometimes feel like someone is right there with you, even if you can't see or touch them? You don't talk about it. You're afraid people will say you're imagining things. You should let it go, but you can't, because deep down, you know. What you lost wasn't just a person. It was a piece of your soul you once entrusted to them. And then, slowly, questions begin to rise in your mind. At first, faint, but then, louder. What happens after we die? Where are my loved ones now? If I were to leave this world tomorrow, what would remain? These questions don't come during the day. They visit at night, when the world has fallen asleep, and you're lying there, staring at the ceiling, listening to your heartbeat, waiting for something that never quite arrives. No voices speak, but inside you, there's a storm. Have you ever had nights like that? Maybe you saw them in your dreams. The ones you loved. They smiled. They stayed silent. They passed through you like a breeze. You woke up, trying to hold on to the feeling. But it slipped away, as if it was never real. An existential crisis isn't an earthquake. It's a quiet drizzle, subtle, persistent. It makes you sigh more often, stare into the distance a little longer, and wonder, is this all life has to offer? And then one day, you sit down, not to work, not to check your phone, but to finally listen to yourself. No music, no podcast, just your breath. And in that moment, you realize you've never truly listened to your soul. Maybe that's the beginning. Maybe you're standing at the edge of something beyond this physical world, between what you once believed was true and a question that's never been answered. Is death the end? This video isn't about religion. It's not here to tell you what to believe. It's not here to preach. But if you've ever felt like this, if you've ever felt like you no longer belong to the world you once knew, then maybe, just maybe, You're standing at the threshold of something ancient, a journey spoken of in sacred texts, a realm called Bardo, where the soul begins to return to itself. And that journey, according to Tibetan tradition, lasts 49 days. But if you understand it, you can begin to prepare right now, because the most frightening thing isn't dying. It's dying before ever truly living. So what happens after that final moment, when your heart stops beating, when your last breath fades into the unknown? It's not darkness, it's not an ending, it's an awakening. In that very first moment, the instant you leave your body, there is no pain, no sound, no weeping or sorrow, only a vast stillness, a weightlessness, as if someone gently lifted you out of yourself. You look down and see your body lying there. But you're no longer it. You may try to speak, to reach out, but no one hears, no one sees. This is when you enter Bardo, the in-between, a realm where for 49 days the soul journeys through dimensions unlike anything you've ever known in life. And it all begins with light. A radiant burst appears, not physical light, but something beyond language. It doesn't come from outside. It comes from within you. Ancient texts call it the Primordial Light, the purest, most sacred essence of who you truly are. If in that moment you recognize that light as you, fearless, free, whole, you dissolve into it. You exit the cycle. You are liberated, but almost no one does, because we've been trained to fear, to flinch from light, just as we've spent a lifetime running from the truth. And so, instead of merging, the soul panics. And when fear rises, illusion begins. You begin to hear whispers, echoes, voices calling your name from beyond the veil. Maybe it's your mother's voice, an old lover, or your own as a child. You start to see images, familiar places, beloved faces, but they're not real. They're projections of your consciousness, fragments of memories, unresolved desires, emotions that never found peace, now taking form. And you believe they're real. You follow the voices, like a lost child wandering through a forest of dreams. And this is the first trap of Bardo, the trap of nostalgia. If you don't realize you're dreaming, you get pulled deeper into the mirage, and soon your consciousness begins to split. That pure light now divides into two, light and shadow, love and fear, rising and falling. In the days that follow, you encounter radiant beings, gentle light, images of angels, enlightened masters, guides, but they are not separate from you. They are you, the most divine part of your soul, taking shape. If you recognize them, you reunite with yourself. You transcend. But if you hesitate, if you doubt your worth, if you shrink in shame, the light fades. And then darker forms appear. Not demons, not monsters from stories, but your shadows, your rage, your guilt, your buried memories. Now given shape, they scream, they chase, they terrify. And again, you run. But here's the truth. You're running from yourself. In Bardo, your mind is the projector, and you are the audience. You project fear, and then you believe it. This is the second great test, illusion. If you can't pause, can't turn to face these shapes and say, "Nothing here can harm me unless I fear it," then you remain trapped in the current. By the third or fourth week, you enter a realm known as the Great Mirror of Karma. And here, you don't just remember your past, you relive it from the inside out. You don't just recall what you did, you feel every word, every emotion, every thought, not just as yourself, but as the people you touched. If you ever hurt someone, you feel their pain, as if it were your own. If you held someone in love, you feel that warmth flood back through you, like a wave of light. No angels are recording your deeds, no external judge, only you, facing yourself, with nothing to hide behind, and your state of mind after experiencing this. It will determine what happens next. If you're consumed by guilt, regret, anger, or clinging, you're drawn back into the cycle of rebirth. But if you can let go, look back without blame, without gripping, without punishing yourself, then you pass through. This is the third test, release. Let go of what no longer serves you. Let go of the faces, the stories, the desires, because in Bardo, you can't take anything with you. Only when you hold nothing can you be truly free. But the most important thing Tibetan masters emphasize is not what happens after you die. It's what's happening right now. Because Bardo is not just some mystical space after death. Bardo is this life. When you don't realize you're dreaming, you live inside the dream. When you don't know you're in Bardo, you're swept away by it. And when you don't know you're alive, you're slowly dying without ever noticing. Take a moment to reflect on an ordinary day in your life. You wake up, and the first thing you reach for is your phone. News, emails, tasks, social media. A whirlwind pulls you away from yourself within minutes of the morning. You dive into the rush, replying to messages, joining meetings, making plans, solving problems. Everything moves so fast that you don't have a single moment of true awareness, and by nightfall, you're exhausted. You lie in bed, eyes still scrolling. My mind is still racing about what needs to happen tomorrow. A day goes by, a week, a year. And at some point you ask yourself, have I truly lived? Modern life, with all its busyness, distractions, and pressure, it is a long Bardo in disguise. You are surrounded by illusions, the illusion of success, the illusion of approval, the illusion of wealth, status, and identity. You believe that if you had more money, you'd be happy. If more people loved you, you'd finally feel whole. If you reached that next goal, you'd finally know peace. But why, even after achieving so much, do you still feel empty? Because none of it is real. Your mind is projecting daytime dreams, dreams of fear of being forgotten, dreams of craving to be seen, dreams of a self that is terrified to disappear. And just like the soul wandering in Bardo, you're running. You run from wounds that never healed. You run from the truth that everything you own will one day vanish. You run from the present moment. Where do you exist, but never stay long enough to feel it? Bardo is the space between lives, and your life right now is the space between moments of awakening. You live in memories of the past and anxieties for the future, and you forget that only now holds the power to change anything. So if you're waiting for death to wake up, it'll be too late. The moment to awaken is the moment you realize you're dreaming. And if you're still listening to this, maybe a part of you has already begun to wake up. In Bardo, the mind creates reality, but that's just as true. In life, every thought you feed creates an emotion. Every emotion you cling to shape your action, and every repeated action becomes karma, becomes habit, becomes the you think you are today. If you live in fear, worry, or regret, your consciousness reflects a world full of shadows. But if you live in presence, surrender, and gratitude, then you've already stepped out of Bardo. While still alive. This is not theory. This is practice. And just like in Bardo, the only place you can begin is here. Not after 10 years of meditation, not after you've read all the books, but right here, in this breath. If death is the final exam, then life is the study guide you can rewrite every single day. And if Bardo is a realm of illusions we enter after we die, then what if I told you another Bardo is happening right now, right here, in your everyday life? Every moment you're swept away by tasks, worries, responsibilities, and forget yourself. Every time you react instead of choose. Every time you run from pain instead of facing it, you're drifting in Bardo. But here's the miracle. Bardo isn't just a trap. It can be a doorway. If you learn to awaken within this living Bardo, you no longer need to fear the Bardo that follows death. And to do that, you don't need to become a monk. You don't need to retreat into the mountains or read hundreds of books. You just need 3 things. 3 simple but profound practices you can begin. Today, practice 1. Meditation. Stop and see. Meditation isn't about reaching some mystical state. It's the most humble thing you can do for yourself. Stop and listen. Sit down in stillness. No phone, no music, no expectation. Just you, your body, and your breath. At first, your mind will feel like a flock of scattered birds. Thoughts will rush in. Unfinished tasks, things you forgot, worries about tomorrow, next week, or next year. Don't try to chase them away. Don't try to control them. Just bring your attention gently to the breath. Inhale. Exhale. Each deep breath is a thread pulling your soul back from the dream world. Try just 5 minutes a day. Not a lot, just consistent. Your presence in the now is the first beam of light breaking through the fog of Bardo. Practice 2. Writing. Befriend your mind. We think thousands of thoughts every day. But how often do we stop to truly look at what our mind is saying? Start with a small notebook. No phone, no app, just paper and pen. Let your hand translate what your silent soul has been wanting to say. Write down, today I feel. What's making me feel empty is, what am I afraid to name? Write not to analyze, not to fix, but to shine a light. When you dare to put your fear, your grief, your anger on the page, they begin to lose their shadowy power. You are no longer a victim of emotion. You become the witness. A journal, when written with honesty, isn't a place for rambling. It's a place to return to yourself. Practice 3. Reading. Connect with timeless wisdom. Some words were written thousands of years ago, yet when you read them, they echo like a whisper inside your heart today. Ancient texts like the Diamond Sutra, the Tao Te Ching, and the Bhagavad Gita, or modern gems like When Things Fall Apart by Pema Chodron, The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, or The Art of Dying by Ram Dass. They don't give you formulas, but they offer a map. You don't have to understand everything. You don't have to believe instantly. Just read slowly, a paragraph, a page, each day. Read to remind yourself, you are not alone on this path back to your soul. Sometimes just one sentence, it can change the course of an entire life. These 3 practices, meditation, writing, reading, are the 3 lanterns in the maze of Bardo. When life leaves you lost, when pain pulls you down, when grief makes you forget who you are, these are the anchors that hold you steady, the threads that guide you out of illusion. You don't need to wait for everything to fall apart. You don't need to wait to be freer, more stable, or more enlightened. Just begin today. Sit down. Write 1 line, read 1 passage. Let Bardo no longer be the place where you lose yourself, but the place where you finally awaken. Sometimes, to understand a deep truth, we don't need lofty philosophies or ancient scriptures. We just need to witness the life of one human being, someone like you, like me. Someone is learning how to walk out of the dark. Let me tell you the story of Eleanor. She wasn't a guru, not enlightened. She never claimed to be special. And perhaps that's why her story reaches something deep in all of us. Eleanor, 63 years old, lived in Oregon. She spent her entire life as a nurse, caring for others, from patients to her husband to her children. She said for over 40 years, she never put herself first, always telling herself, when the kids grow up, when my husband retires, when I finally have time, then I'll live for me. But life doesn't wait. One autumn night, her husband passed away from a sudden stroke. No warning, no goodbye, just gone. And only weeks later, her youngest son moved away. The house, once full of life, fell into a silence that chilled her to the bone. Everything that once gave her a reason to wake up each morning vanished. "No one needs me anymore," she wrote. "I don't know who I am if I'm not the one taking care of others." At first, she sank into a fog. She stopped eating, stopped speaking. Some days, she sat in her recliner for hours, staring out the window but seeing nothing, just a deep hole inside. Then, one day, by chance, she came across a video about the Tibetan Book of the Dead. A calm, deep voice was speaking about the stages of the soul after death, about the primordial light, about the illusions the mind creates. And Eleanor began to cry. Not because she was afraid of death, but because for the first time, someone had put into words the emptiness she had been carrying for so long. She realized she had died in some way, the moment her old life collapsed. But that death wasn't the end. It was a beginning. From that day on, Eleanor began a new path. She didn't know what she was doing, didn't know if it would help, but she began. Each morning, she meditated for 10 minutes. At first, it was a struggle. Her thoughts raced, her body fidgeted. But slowly, she touched something quiet inside herself, a stillness she'd never known before. She bought a notebook, and every evening she wrote scattered thoughts, old angers never spoken, the loneliness of a woman who had lived her whole life for others and had never once truly listened to herself. She began to read Pema Chodron, Ram Dass, Eckhart Tolle, not for answers, but for the comfort of knowing she was not alone. "I didn't find the answers," she wrote in her journal, "but I found space to ask the questions again." Day by day, something began to shift. Not the world outside, but the way she saw it. The house was still empty. But now, it was a sacred space where she could breathe. She still lived alone, but I no longer felt lonely. She stopped waiting for the right time to start living. She was living, with herself, no roles, no pretending, and slowly she began to share her journey with other women in her community, not to teach, but to walk beside them, to say, "I was lost too, and I found my way back." Eleanor's story isn't a miracle. It's the quiet strength of everyday courage, the courage to face emptiness, the courage to breathe through grief, the courage to write down what you never dared to say out loud, the courage to enter the world within, the one you've avoided your whole life. You could be Eleanor. Maybe you've never meditated, never read a single spiritual book, never written down your fears. But if you've made it this far, it means something in you has already begun to listen. A small voice inside you, steady, persistent, is whispering, "It's time. Time to stop running. Time to walk into the Bardo of your own life, not to fear it, but to awaken through it." Eleanor didn't wait for death to wake up. She let her loss become the doorway to a new life. And you can too. Not perfectly, not completely ready, but honestly. And now, just begin. You've come this far with me. Through light and shadow, through meditation, journaling, reading, through the ordinary and extraordinary journey of Eleanor. And now, we stand at a threshold. a final question. Not, what happens after we die? But, how are you living? Right now? Because if there is one undeniable truth, it's this: death does not change you. It only reveals you in your purest form. It is not an ending. It's the final mirror, one that reflects your consciousness without the masks of roles, status, or identity. If you live in fear, you carry fear into Bardo. If you lie to yourself, you will be lost in illusions. If you've never truly awakened, then even as your body fades, the cycle will continue. That's why Bardo isn't just what happens after death. It's the state you're in right now. Every day, you live without awareness. And most of us live as if we'll never die. We accumulate. We postpone. We wait for the right time to finally live. But none of us knows if that time will ever come. In modern culture, you're encouraged to chase so many things: recognition, security, success. But when were you last encouraged to pause and ask, where is my mind right now? Awakening doesn't come from grand gestures. It comes from the smallest of acts, repeated in honest presence. Take one deep breath before you respond, writing down your fear instead of avoiding it, speaking to yourself with kindness instead of criticism, and most of all, having the courage to sit with uncertainty. Freedom is not something anyone can give you. Not a saint, not a guru, not a ritual, not a teaching. Freedom only arises when you are willing to let go, not of the world outside, but of the chains within, expectations, obsessions, shame, the feeling that you are never enough. You can travel to the ends of the earth, meet the greatest spiritual masters, but if you're not ready to look within, that journey becomes another form of escape. Bardo is not a place where you are judged. It is the place where you judge yourself through your memories, emotions, and the choices you left incomplete. If you've lived unconsciously, your illusions will pull you back. If you've lived with awareness, your light will guide you forward. It all depends on how you're living right now. Maybe you think you're not ready, that you're too busy, too messy, too uncertain, but awakening doesn't ask for perfection. It asks for honesty. Honesty that you're tired. Honesty that you don't know. Honesty that you're searching for something deeper, and in that moment of truth, the door begins to open. That's what Eleanor did. That's what you can do. Not tomorrow, not in the next life, but in your very next breath. There will be days you forget, moments you feel lost. But remember, awakening isn't a constant state. It's a return. Returning to the breath, returning to what is true, returning to you. The breath is real. The feelings are real. And among all the illusions, there is one thing that cannot be touched. The awareness that quietly watches everything. That is you, the true self, unborn, undying, needing no proof, and impossible to take away. We do not know what happens in the end, but we do know what is happening right now. And the most miraculous thing is, you always have a choice. The choice to stop, to reflect, and to begin living, as if you were truly here. No one else can do it for you. But if you begin, then you don't have to wait for death. To begin your liberation, if you're still here, listening until the very last seconds, that's not a coincidence. You are hearing your call, not a call to go searching for someone to lead you, but a whisper, quiet, deep, inviting you to return to yourself. And that path doesn't begin with some dramatic shift. It begins with the smallest things, repeated with presence. Try sitting in stillness for 5 minutes each morning. No phone, no goal, just you and your breath. Give yourself 10 minutes to write down what you're feeling. It doesn't have to be beautiful. It doesn't have to make sense. It just has to be true. Read one page from a soul who's walked this path before you. Just one page. to plant a new seed in your inner garden. You don't need to change your whole life, you just need to change the way you show up inside it. And if this journey touched something in you, leave a comment below. Just one line, "I'm listening." That's all. It's not just a message to me, it's a small promise to yourself. And if you feel this video was worth it, share it with someone you care about, someone who may be struggling, someone searching for something, but doesn't yet have the words. Bardo doesn't arrive only when you stop breathing. It begins when you stop living truthfully. But you can awaken right here, right now.